Okay, I am going to start where I left off yesterday because I didn't get to quite finish this chapter because my reading was going to be longer than 15 minutes. Right here is where I stopped. There was a silence as all gazed, I supposed, at me. Painter Chen, another voice said in great awe. This is indeed a great work. Thank you, Magistrate, the master said. I am glad it pleases you. Then our agreement will be fulfilled? Yes, said the voice. The village will be free from taxation for the next year, and I will take the painting. Even though I did not know exactly what was going on, I knew I did not want to belong to Magistrate Tiger. His voice had an undertone of cruelty and greed, even while he was expressing his pleasure. I tried to protest, but my still lips uttered no sound. Then I was rolled up, and all sound and feeling disappeared. I do not know how long I was rolled up. It might have been a day or a month or a year. All I could do was wait. But finally I was unrolled, and I felt a cold gust of air all over me. If I could have, I would have shivered. This painting is a masterpiece, a voice said in surprise. Then it quickly turned oily and flattering. As only fitting for your greatness. Yes, Magistrate Tiger said. Have it hung behind my chair. Yes, Magistrate, the voice said, and then hesitated and said, How strange. What's strange? The magistrate asked. Well, the voice said, there are no eyes on this dragon. The painter must have forgotten. No eyes? The magistrate boomed. Painter Chen dared give me an unfinished painting. I will double tax his village for the next 10 years. Magistrate, a third voice said, one that seemed a little kinder. It is only a minor flaw. If we just dotted in the eyes, the dragon would be finished. Yes, the magistrate said, obviously considering. Bring me a paintbrush and ink. I heard the servants shuffling and bringing the paintbrush and ink. I felt the magistrate's hot, dry breath on my nose as he came close to me and felt the cold ink touch my eye. And suddenly I could see. I saw the magistrate's fat face leering over me as he reached over and dotted in my other eye. That's a good illustration of what we just read. As sight came into both my eyes, a warm feeling filled me, like drinking hot tea on a cold day. I felt strength come into my arms and hands and legs and feet, and my neck and head stretched for the first time. All the loud yells I had wanted to make now came rushing out of my mouth, and I gave a huge roar that made the magistrate fall over. It has come alive, I heard him gasp, and I heard the servants screaming, Dragon! It has come alive! Dragon! I knew this was my chance to free myself from Magistrate Tiger. I jumped from where I was and rushed over to everyone, knocking down desks and chairs and columns. I saw the blue sky and green leaves through a window. I went toward it and simply crashed through the wall to get through. As I left, the building was falling down and all the people were yelling, Dragon! They screamed, Dragon! I knew I had to leave as soon as possible, so I ran as fast as I could into the forest and left them far, far away. I have lived in the forest since then. So I think, the dragon said, my name is Dragon, because that is what everyone called me. Dragon, Minli repeated, and she tried not to smile. Well, I guess it's a good enough name. It will be easy for me to remember. The dragon nodded, pleased to have found himself a name. So you were born from a painting, Minli said. That explains why you are so different from the dragons my father told me about. Your father knew other dragons? The dragon asked eagerly. I have never seen another dragon. I always thought, if I could fly, I would finally see another like me. Well, Minli said, I don't think my father ever knew any dragons. He just told stories about them. Most people think dragons are just in stories. You are the only dragon I've ever met. Oh, the dragon said sadly, and I am not even a real dragon. All this time, Minli had been cutting the twine ropes. At that very moment, Minli cut the last rope and rubbed the dragon's arm. You are the only dragon I've ever met in real life, she said, and you feel real to me. So I think you're a real dragon, or at least real enough. Anyway, if we're going to Neverending Mountain together, let's at least be real friends. Yes, Dragon agreed, and they both smiled. Chapter 12. The goldfish man turned around and smiled questioningly at Ma and Ba, who could do nothing but continue to stare. He was slender and small, which was perhaps why it was easy to mistake his footprints for Minli's. The dragging lines Ma had thought were from Minli's walking stick led to his cart, and the bowls of goldfish caught the sifting beams from the sun, slivering it into flashing sparkles of light. The goldfish man's eyes also flashed as he looked at Ma and Ba and their dust-covered clothes and haggard, tired faces. "Can I help you?" he asked them. "We were looking for our daughter," Ba stammered. "We're from the village of Fruitless Mountain." "You sold her a goldfish, and then," Ma sputtered, "and she ran away to change our fortune." "I see," the goldfish man said, and again he looked at them, at Ma's tight, angry frown and Ba's careworn, worried face. "Are you going after her to stop her?" "Of course," Ba said. "We need to bring her home." "Yes," Ma said. "She is acting crazy. Who knows what could happen to her?" "She could succeed," the goldfish man said steadily. "She could find a way to change your fortune." "She's trying to find Never-Ending Mountain," Ma said. "Ask questions to the old man of the moon. There is no way for her to succeed." "Yes," Ba said. "It's impossible." The goldfish man looked a third time at Ma and Ba, and this time they felt it. Under his gaze, Ma and Ba suddenly felt like freshly peeled oranges, and their words fell away from them. Inexplicably, they felt ashamed. "Let me tell you a story," the goldfish man said. The story of the goldfish man. My grandmother, Lao Lao, was a famous fortune teller. People from faraway villages would line up at our home asking for lucky dates for weddings and predictions for their children. If she was ever wrong, we never heard of it. But a week before my 19th birthday, we heard her moaning in her room. When we rushed to her, we found her sitting on the floor with her fortune-telling stick spread around her. To my surprise, as soon as I entered the room, her piercing eyes fixed upon me. "You," she said, "you will die next week on your birthday." It was as if she had exploded a firecracker in the room. My parents and aunts and cousins burst into exclamations and wails. It is true," my grandmother insisted. "I have checked and rechecked over and over again, and the sticks always say the same. Next week on his 19th birthday he will die. That is his fortune." I could not believe it. How could this be? But my belief in my grandmother was unshakable. If she said so, it must be true. I stood staring as my family created a storm around me. Finally, I said, with a mouth as dry as sand, "Lao Lao, isn't there anything I can do?" "There is only one thing you can do," she said, "but it is doubtful it will work." "I'll do it," I said. "First," Lao Lao said, "we must get a bottle of the finest wine and make a box of sweets." So Lao Lao went to the rich magistrate of the town and persuaded him to give her a bottle of his best wine. My mother and aunts hurried over to the kitchen and prepared cakes, cookies, and sweetmeats with more care than ever before. Before the aromas of the delicacies were captured in our most ornate box, they floated in the air, causing all the neighborhood animals to whine at our door. And then Lao Lao went to her room and began to read her fortune sticks. When she came out, she gave me the box of sweets and bottle of wine and sat me down. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "You must do exactly as I say. Tomorrow morning you must walk north of the village. Do not stop until the moon begins to appear in the sky. When it does, you will see a mountain before you, and at the foot of the mountain you will see an old man reading a book. Open the box of sweets and the bottle of wine and set them by him. But do not say a word unless he speaks to you first. This is the only chance we have to change your fortune." So the next morning I followed her instructions, and it was as she'd said. I walked all day, and when the sun finally withdrew from the sky, there was a vast mountain in front of me, whose tip seemed to touch the moon. Sitting cross-legged at the bottom was an old man reading a giant book. The light from the moon seemed to make him glow silver. I opened the bottle of wine and box of sweets and quietly laid them next to him. Then I sat and waited. The old man didn't notice me and continued to read. My mouth watered as the smell of the sweets drifted in the air, but I didn't move. And even though the old man was engrossed in his book, he must have smelled them as well, because without lifting his eyes from the page, he began to eat. It was only when the bottle of wine was empty and he was eating the last cake that the old man lifted his head. He seemed surprised to see a half-eaten cake in his hand. "I've been eating someone's food," he said to himself. He looked up and saw me sitting nearby. "You, boy, was this your food?" "Yes," I said, and came closer as he beckoned. "Well," he said to me, "what are you doing here?" I told the old man my story while he rubbed his beard. When I finished, he said nothing, but began to turn pages in his book. Finally, he nodded. Yes, it is true, the old man said. You are to live only 19 years. And he turned the book toward me, and in the moonlight I read my name on the page. Next to my name was the number 19. Please, I couldn't help asking, isn't there any way to change it? Change it? The old man asked, surprised at the thought. Change the book of fortune? Yes, I nodded. Well, the old man said, stroking his beard, I am indebted to you for having eaten your food. He took a paintbrush from his robe and studied the page. He said to himself, maybe if... No, perhaps... Ah, yes, this is how it can be done. And with a simple flick from his brush, he changed the 19 to 99. Good, he said to me. You now have many more years of life. Live them well. Then he closed his book, stood up, and began to walk up the mountain, leaving me staring behind him. I sat there until he disappeared from sight and then turned around and went home. The next week on my birthday there was a terrible typhoon. The wind howled as it never had before, and a tree fell right on top of the roof of our house and crashed into my room, narrowly missing me. If it had fallen just a bit more to one side, I would have been easily killed, but as I climbed out of the ruins of my room, I saw my grandmother's eyes staring into mine. Silently, she nodded. She did not need words to tell me what had happened. I knew my fortune had been changed. But for Min Lee to try to do that is different, Boss started. She's trying to find Neverending Mountain. Ask a question. She's just a small girl. Perhaps, the goldfish man said. You need to trust her. But, Ma said, what she wants is impossible. Impossible, the goldfish man said. Don't you see? Even fates written in the book of fortune can be changed. How can anything be impossible? Ma and Ba could find no words. His eyes and the hundreds of eyes of the goldfish behind him seemed to silently scold them. As they looked at the ground, the goldfish man shifted his bag and turned toward his cart. Here, a gift, the goldfish man said, placing a bowl into Ba's shaking hands. The fish, the pale silver color of the moon, circled in the bowl. Perhaps if you cannot trust that your daughter will find Neverending Mountain, you should trust that she will return home to you, because that is not impossible. So, whether Min Lee brings it to you or not, I wish you good fortune. And with a bow, the goldfish man walked away. His bowls of goldfish cast pieces of rainbows in the air, making him sparkle in the sun. Ma and Ba stood and watched him until he looked like a twinkling star in the distance.